Okay, guys, so apparently the next part has some sort of your discretion advice sort of thing. So just sit back and enjoy these last two parts for this video. Are we all ready? Let's go. Friday. I saw Bella from my bedroom window, so I went outside to introduce myself. I expect she already knew who I was. She gave me a wave and said, "Hey Rachel, it's been a while. I haven't seen you in like forever. How are you?" I was floored. I swear I had no idea who this person was. Forever is right, I thought to myself. I decided to play along. I agreed with her. Yeah, it's been a while, I said. Figuring I looked out every bit as awkward as I felt. Never was good with small talk, or regular talk, or any other talk outside of a keyboard. Bella, however, seemed to thrive on it. Getting information out of her was going to be easier than I thought. She told me all about how much she loved college. She joined a sorority. She told me the name, but it went right over my head. And she told me about the pledging and geek life. I smiled and nodded politely. It's pretty much all I could contribute to conversations with strangers. She asked me what college I was going to, and I admitted I still wasn't done with high school year. I got behind in sophomore year when everything started. "How's the baby?" she asked. My eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. I shook my head. She obviously had me confused with someone else. Me? Having a baby? I have no experience with that. I let out a nervous laugh and said, I don't think that was me. Maybe it was Lizzie that was pregnant. I can't remember, she said. Must be, I said. There was a pause in the conversation. I tried to figure out how to phrase it. "Do you remember that cornfield maze off the highway?" "Oh yeah, I love that place. A group of us from high school, used to sneak in at night and get wasted. You still doing that?" she asked. I shrugged. I hate the taste of beer. I don't understand how anyone can drink so much of it until they get drunk. People do that. "Do you remember anything unusual happening?" I pried. Her smile faltered. Her stance became uncomfortable. I may not I may not be good at talking, but I'm pretty good at picking up body language. She seemed uncomfortable with the topic. "Not really. I found an old cell phone in the field. There was a video on it, and you were in it. Do you remember?" I could see her fidgeting. Judy came out and waved at us from her front porch. "You saw my mom in the video." "I have to go, I'm sorry." I watched as she looked up, driving back inside the house. She was hiding something, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. She spent the rest of the day avoiding me. Every time she came outside to vape, I did my best to get a straight answer. Each time she told me she either had to make a phone call and couldn't talk, or she didn't remember that night. I doubted her answer. Witnessing a murder wasn't something you just forgot. Had my dad gotten to her too? Maybe it's me being paranoid. But once when I walked outside to take the trash out and maybe sort of eavesdrop on a phone conversation, I've sworn she said she was asking questions. By the time the afternoon came around, I had made 4 attempts to pry information from her, each one failing worse than the last. Maybe I should try talking about something else. She seemed to enjoy talking about school. When I approached the 5th time, she motioned to head back inside, but I stopped her. I told my school counselor was on me to finish high school and to pick out a college, which wasn't a lie. I asked her what applying for college was like. She seemed to lighten up at this. She walked me through the daunting process, which seemed absolutely appalling to me. "How am I supposed to pay for it, though?" I asked. Well, we didn't live in the ghetto or project. It certainly wasn't a ritzy high class area, sorry. I certainly couldn't afford tuition for a place like UC Davis like Bella had managed. I was surprised since parents weren't that well off either. You can get student loans. Although the thought of living in debt doesn't appeal to me. I got a scholarship. If it wasn't for that, I don't know what I'd do. "So they paid for your school. What's the catch?" I asked. She paused to take a puff of her cinnamon-scented vape before answering. Pretty much just gotta keep my grades up, do a certain number of community service hours, stay out of legal trouble, stuff like that. Hey, I gotta go, but if you have any more questions about school, hit me up, she said before heading back in the house. Ugh. I messed around on the computer for the rest of the day before I decided to lie down for a bit. I was still feeling off. As soon as my head hit the pillow, my mind began to race with the possibilities of what was going on. But right when I was about to fall asleep, my phone rang. I reached into my very brain pocket and answered with a groggy, "Hello." The man on the other line introduced himself as Detective Fuller, and he was returning my call while Detective Gonzalez was on vacation. I sat up in my bed and listened intently. He asked me if I had seen the news. I hadn't. I ran into the living room and turned on the TV before flipping to the news. The breaking news line grabbed my attention. 2 bodies have been discovered in the field today. A man and a woman, all with a gun. What happened? I asked in shock. How? I came across the video you sent in. It was enough to get a search warrant. I'd like to ask you to come down for questioning today, if that's alright. Yes, I started out. I'll come down right away. I hung up the phone as I watched the segment. I heard my dad come in and stand next to me. He stood as still as a statue. I heard his breath hitch. Once the clip was over, he turned to look at me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, I said, dropping my head. I had to. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Rachel, what have you done? You killed my mother. Your own wife. He looked at me, eyes wide with fright. Don't you remember? Remember what? What they did to you, Rachel. Don't you remember the pregnancy? I stepped back. No, that's not possible. I was never pregnant. There was no baby. You miscarried. His voice was slow and drawn out as if talking to a child or a crazy person. You asked me earlier if you had ever been in the hospital. You were. 3 years ago. You were assaulted. What kind of mother takes the word of her boyfriend over her daughter? I wanted to deny it, but his words began to unlock memories deep in the recesses of my mind. I remembered the cold stirrups underneath my legs. I remembered staring up at the great ceiling, wishing the incentives of testing would be over. They had given me a morning after pill, but it was too late. It wasn't the first time he had done this to me. I had backed away as more and more memories began to flood in. The night terrors I've been having, they weren't just dreams. They were memories. The pain and blood I imagined it was from the miscarriage. I came home from school sick that day. I walked in on Mom and her boyfriend. She told me he was just a friend from work, and I believed her. I was such a naive 14-year-old. I told them I wasn't feeling well and went to go away in my room. Woke up several hours later to find him there, standing over my bed, looking down at me. He gripped his hand tight around my ankle and pulled me down the bed. He got on top of the bed as it sunk under his weight and pinned my wrists above my head. Why couldn't I scream? Where was my mother? She would surely come and save me. She didn't. It was the first of several attacks. Tears streamed down my face. You did it to protect me? I said. How could I have forgotten all of this? Tears. He shook his head. Rachel, I didn't kill your mother. You did. I sat on the couch as Detective Mario, Gonzalez, Bella, and my father stood around me. I couldn't have. The video, it clearly showed a man, I said. Everyone looked away awkwardly. Mario finally spoke. What exactly do you think happened in that video? I told them my version of events. My father and Mario exchanged glances. Bella, why don't you tell her what you saw that night? I looked to the blonde girl in front of me, afraid of what I'd hear. I saw a masked person come out of the clearing that night, but it wasn't a man speaking, it was a female. I couldn't see who it was, but it was definitely female. No, I stuttered. This couldn't be happening. I heard my mom talking about not leaving me on the video. I heard a man's voice. I heard her say, I know it's you, Tom. Arlo sighed and took his cell phone out of his pocket. I didn't want to show you this, but I think you need to see it. I watched the screen as the two girls giggled and pointed the camera at the couple in the cornfield. I heard my mom talking, but it wasn't about not leaving me. It was about not leaving her job. Shots were fired, Richard went down, and then I heard the voice. My voice. My mom picked up the phone and ran. She pointed the camera to her face and said, I love you, Richard. I love you. Richard. Not, I love you, Rachel. I choked out a sob as I looked up at them. Tears fell from my face. I turned it off. I couldn't watch anymore. How was this possible? Mario took his phone back. You haven't been in a good place, Rachel. Are you aware of what a delusion is? My father got on his knees and took my hands in his. I don't blame you for what happened, Rachel. What they did to you was awful. You couldn't handle that your own mother would do that to you. Along with the stress of the assault and the miscarriage, it was too much. You called me that night, and Mario and myself helped you bury the bodies. We parked a car at the school and the one you had been hiding in to get there. We took Richard's car to the junkyard and had it destroyed. They gave me and Lizzie the scholarship to keep quiet, Bella said softly. You were all trying to protect me, I said, horrified. I'm going to take the fall, my dad said. No, you can't, I said. Guilt of accusing my father began to gnaw at me. I killed them. You can't turn yourself in. It won't do her any good. Her prints are all over the gun. As soon as they run it, they'll come for her. We wore gloves that night, Mario said. Our only hope is an insanity plea. I can't send my daughter to prison, he said. His eyes were wet with tears. If she signs her confession, she won't go to prison. She can enter an insanity plea. She'll go to a hospital. You saw her that night. It wasn't Rachel. I can't do that to my daughter, my dad said. There's got to be another way. Didn't you just tell me you took her to the hospital for self-inflicted injuries? Mario asked. His words pounded into my head. It was true. I had done that to myself. I was a danger to myself and others. They were both putting their jobs on the line to save me. I was so numb with shock I didn't care anymore. I'll do it, I said. I'll sign it. They both looked at me for a solid minute. Are you sure, Rachel? Is this really what you want to do? My dad asked. I nodded my head as Mario took a piece of paper and pen and handed it to me. I, Rachel Marie Brooks, killed my mother, Stacy Brooks, and her boyfriend, Richard Chancellor, in a fit of insanity. I signed it, dated it, and slid the piece of paper over. I found something disturbing about metal detecting. Final part, by Sarah Butters. It was a rough night. Mario called the police station and said I made a confession. There were lots of tears as the police came and took me away. But I'll never forget the look on my dad's face and the words he spoke to me. I'm so proud of you for being so brave, he said. He had never said those words to me, though his words have kept me going all this time. Apparently it wasn't the murders I forgot, or the abuse, or the miscarriage, but a whole 6 months of my life was missing. It never clicked until my first night at California State Hospital, as I lay on the hard, uncomfortable sleepy mats that passed for beds and stared up at the dull gray ceiling did more memories come back. I had been here before. I had spent 5 months here, my 10th year of school. This place, this horrible place, what screams and shouts of patients echo through the halls. This place for the mentally insane is what caused me to lose my memories. This was the reason I fell behind in school. How had I lost so much time? Not all of it came back, mind you, but enough to fully come to terms with the fact that I really was responsible for the death of my mother. It was the worst night of my life. I cried until I made myself sick to my stomach. Then I cried some more. How could I live with myself? How could I live with this immeasurable guilt that suffocated me? No normal person could ever function knowing that they were responsible for someone's death. It was clear my father was not to blame. Only a monster could continue to go on with their day-to-day lives as if nothing had ever happened. Only a monster like me. My 3 cellmates eventually got tired of my inconsolable anguished cries and paged an orderly. They came and said that they had made with an injection to the neck. Before I went under, I told them I didn't want to live anymore. I told them I wanted to be left for dead and buried in the field I had abandoned, where I had abandoned my own mother. I woke the next day unable to move my arms. I struggled to sit up in my drug-induced haze. Now this wasn't so bad. I could live like this, keep becoming guys. I thought, I can't feel the pain. Maybe if it wasn't for the overwhelming nausea that wet my throat when I moved, I could just stay like this. Even the uncomfortable bed wasn't so uncomfortable anymore. A few hours later, I woke up needing the bathroom. The drugs had worn off a bit, and I was able to sit up. My first thought when I looked around the room was the realization that this wasn't the room I'd fallen asleep in. Instead of 2 bunk beds and an early clean room that smelled of disinfectant, I found myself in a padded cell by myself. No bed, no toilets, no anything. My arms were tied around myself in a permanent hug. I really couldn't move. It wasn't just the drugs. Hello? I called out. Hello? I kept yelling and shouting until someone finally poked their heads in. Where am I? I asked. The safe room. It's where we keep patients who are prone to self-injury or physical violence, he explained. Oh, okay. The safe room is where we keep patients who are prone to self-injury or physical violence, he explained. His voice was monotone and showed no emotion to my situation. It was as if he had seen girls locked in a straitjacket every day. Then again, judging by my environment, he probably did. I was confused to say the least. It wasn't until later that I remembered making the comments that I did. But at the time, the last thing I remembered was hurling into our room's shared toilet. Can you take me to the bathroom? I asked. Nah, you can stay here for another 16 hours, he said. His eyes showed no sign of what was expected of me. His face showed no expression. I furrowed my eyebrows. I looked around the room. Someone will be here later for cleaning. He turned and left me, before closing the door. I heard the locking mechanism that made me all the more aware of my situation. After a while, I began to struggle against the jacket more for something to distract myself with. It wouldn't budge, and after a while, all I had managed to do was hurt my shoulder. I laid back down as the fear of my future began to creep in, along with the even present pulses of my full bladder. I closed my eyes and went back to sleep, hoping the problem would take care of itself. Their problem if I make a mess, I thought as I drifted back to sleep. It didn't work. I woke to someone coming in, pushing a cart of tubs and washcloths. Without a word, they knelt beside me and unbuckled a few straps. I tried to help her by getting free on my own, but she admonished me with a "Don't move." I tried to lie still, but it was too hard with a full bladder. She called me a squirmy one. Her voice was also flat. It was a bit unnerving. She moved a few straps out of the way and looked at me and said, "You're clean." She began to buckle me back in, but my squirming made it difficult. She took in my movements for a few seconds before asking if I was new. What? I asked. Are you new? She asked again, much less patient than before. Yes, I started out. I clamped my knees shut and that's when I became aware of what I was wearing. Go, she ordered. Seriously? That's disgusting. Well, it's one thing to do it on accident, but to do it purposefully. Can you come back later? I mumbled. I think I could do it with someone watching if I tried. I'll come back in the morning when I make my rounds again, she said and motioned to leave. Whoa, 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 no, please, okay, I'll do it. It was easier than I thought it would be, but the cleanup process was every bit as humiliating. Water in the home was like they had melted ice, and then the orderly's movements were full of years of pent-up aggression. The ordeal had reset my tear ducts. By the time I heard the click of locks, I was full-on bawling again. Food was offered, but I declined it every time. By the third past meal, they threatened to mark me down with an eating disorder. I never acknowledged their threats. It couldn't be any worse than being labeled a homicidal maniac. Turns out it was. After being force-fed, I ended up spitting spaghetti in the corner and down front of myself. I was later marked as a purger. Great. It wasn't as bad once they had let me out of the quiet room. I was released from the jacket and led to the shadows to get cleaned up. I still had spaghetti down my chin and neck. They stood and watched. I hated every minute of it, but getting clean was worth it. My freedom from hospital diapers was short-lived. After I went to bed the night I was released from my padded cell. I suspected my fellow inmates narched on me because while I stood in line with the others for the nighttime medication, I was handed a couple of pills along with a hospital diaper. That was nothing like the discreet bedwetting pants I had back home. I really did try to put it on. I did. I just couldn't in my drug-induced haze. I tried asking for pull-ins, but they said this was all they had, so every night was the same routine. They handed me one, and I'd throw it away. My roommates must have complained about the smell, because an orderly followed me to the bathroom and he put it on. The fifth time, I dropped it, and they got impatient and did it themselves. Once again, the humiliation was too much as hot tears fell from my eyes. The days themselves were very structured. Wake up at 6:30, shower with an audience, brush my teeth, and eat what they passed for breakfast. Since I had an eating disorder marked up on my chart, I would be made to finish everything on my plate, even if I detested it. I envy the people who only got to eat half and leave. I'd be left sitting long after everyone else had gone, still trying to force it down my throat while an orderly sat and watched. Usually it was a drawn-out battle of wills, with me being the loser. After breakfast, the same orderly would follow me for an hour to make sure I didn't forcefully throw it back up. It always comes out to say hello without any help thanks to my nightly doses of seroquel and Abilify. They said depending on the results of the trial, I might be allowed to go to the conjoint school and finish getting my high school diploma. For now, though, my days consisted of psychiatric evaluations and group therapies. I was diagnosed with dissociative amnesia, another dissociative disorder I could neither say nor spell. I could only recall a few spread out memories from my past stay, but they were few and far between. The psychiatrist said he remembered me and he showed me my life and notes to prove I really was a patient here. He said I had made a lot of progress since my last day. Apparently I was one of his more catatonic patients. He also said it might be why I don't remember. That was also where my bedwetting problem originated. We talked a bit, and he agreed to take me off the force-feeding list after we concluded it was the medication's doing and not the two-fingered weight loss program. It was the best news I heard all week. After recreation, we were allowed to watch TV. One day I had caught a snippet of the news. I was on it. I was being portrayed as a cold-blooded killer by the district attorney. All eyes in the rec room turned to mine. Mine, however, were glued in horror to the screen. That's when my dad came around. He vouched for me, just like he promised he would. He painted me as a good girl with a troubled past and mental illness. It was also when he announced he was running for mayor. He said my bravery was what gave him the final push towards facing his fear of campaigning. He said if elected, he would devote his time into getting the city better funding for mental health facilities and the town's police force. It was his dream to be mayor. But when I asked him why he didn't run, he just said he couldn't. It was because of me. He didn't want anyone looking deeper into our family history and digging up the truth about me. Now that the cat was out of the bag, he was free to run. When he came to visit me, I asked him why he didn't go with self-defense. He admitted the evidence pointed to first-degree murder. If I didn't get an insanity plea, I was looking at life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The thought I would premeditate my own mother's murder sent my stomach into tight knots. After 3 weeks, I stopped crying during the day, and after 2 months, I stopped crying myself to sleep altogether. The days blurred into each other until it was no longer a horrid and awful place. It was just where I lived. I had a lot of roommates in and out until it seemed like they stuck the long-timers in together. My family, as I called the bunkmates, consisted of a paranoid schizophrenic woman in her 30s who routinely accused us of reading our minds and selling our thoughts to the government, a 20-year-old with head trauma, one middle-aged woman who routinely went streaking down the halls in the co-ed section. She says it's because of her hot flashes, and me, a first-degree murderer. The girl with head trauma, Alicia, seemed to be the most normal out of the others, so I spent most of my time with her. She says she could only remember events for a week before she forgot them, so she spent many hours writing things down and keeping a journal. She said she liked to lie and write something crazy down every day because she'd forget it in a week. When she went back later and read it, she'd always get a kick out of it. She showed me last month's entry. On Tuesday, an escaped hippo tore through the cafeteria and gobbled up the food. I told her that one was true, but it wasn't very nice to call Greg, the front security guard, a hippo because he was overweight. She laughed and wrote a note about it in the corner. When she got to one page, she scanned it and quickly flipped to another before I could read it. We fought over it until I managed to gain control and flip the page back. Apparently, the girl who wets herself in her sleep was caught in the supply closets playing with a broom. I heard her mumble an apology, but I told her for your information that broom handle's name is Steve and our relationship is none of your business. We laughed for a bit and I pushed her away. But I knew she'd get over it in a week. You'll make Steve jealous, I whispered. I don't care, she whispered back. She leaned into me again, but I didn't push her off that time. She was my first love. We broke off 3 days later when she remembered she wasn't dating someone else. She was dating someone else. I was heartbroken. Another week, we were back to being friends, writing notes in her journal. That was how I got into writing. It was an escape from my circumstances. When I wrote novels in my spare time when I wasn't in group sessions, and I kept a diary to keep myself sane. I wrote of the adventures of other girls with mental health issues. Sometimes they were also bedwetters, sometimes they weren't. It helped me cope. Once chronicled the adventures of an 18-year-old living in a dystopian future wrongly accused of murdering her brother because she too had a dissociative identity disorder. Alicia liked that one best. I spent my days lost in the world of my mind, just dreaming that someone too would come save me, and tell me it was all a misunderstanding, but it was nothing but a dream. When the trial finally came, almost a year later, I was given the best verdict possible thanks to my father, an innocent by reason of insanity. It was a tough and emotionally driven trial. My injuries and health records were released to the public, and my past was hung out like dirty laundry. They would know of my diagnosis. They would know of the mess I was, the bedwetting, my abandonment, and everything else under the bloody sun. It stirred up more memories and more pain than I cared to admit. I received many letters for support, along with just as many letters wishing my execution. The prosecution painted me as a menace to society, a calculated and cruel killer trying to play the sympathy card. My side took the stand and said I was not a violent person now that I was under correct care and supervision. I was, as he said, a victim of my circumstances. Unfortunately, it did not release. I'm 21 now. I'm sorry I made it seem like the events were currently happening to me. A few years of of have passed. Things got better when my dad got elected mayor. He moved me to a private center instead of a state-run hospital. It's still far from ideal, but I have internet access now, which is how I'm running to you all. I even have my own room instead of sharing with 3 others. In comparison to where I came from, it's like a resort. It's amazing what money can get you. I spend my days working on my novel plus scattered papers I brought with me. It was hard for my father to visit me, and I know he was super busy being the mayor. It makes me happy to hear from him, though. I always looked forward to his calls. He told me he's thinking of running for governor in a few years. I told him I wish I could be there cheering him on from the side, but he reminded me the reason he even gets to run at all was because of my bravery that night. My heart swelled with pride. It made me feel so much better about all that changed one day. Things would have been good, not great, but good, if she hadn't come. Why did she have to do this to me? I was content not knowing. I had made peace that this was my life now. This is what I deserved. She ruined everything. Bella came one day to visit. I hardly recognized her. She seemed sad. She was no longer her chirpy, ditzy student self. She told me she had graduated college and gotten married. I told her, that's great, but she just shook her head. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Knowing what I did to you is tearing me up inside. I wish I had told her to leave. She kept going. I have to tell you the truth. I cocked my head to the side in confusion. What are you talking about? She whispered. That night, all those years ago, out in the cornfield, we went to the police station to report what we saw. We were drunk. Detective Gonzalez blackmailed us the next day. He said if we spoke a single word of what we saw, he'd arrest us for underage drinking. I couldn't have that on my record, Rachel. I'd lose my scholarship. I stared at her, unwilling to speak. Did you know that detective and your Did you know that detective and your dad were best friends in high school? I shook my head. Rachel, they tampered with the video. It was a fake. The first one you saw was real. It was a man that night in a mask. They made me. She broke down in sobs in the visitor room. Some others stared at us. I was trying to process what she was telling me. But I really had repressed memories. I was hurting myself. I'm mentally ill, I said. I just repressed the murders, right? It's what I've told myself for so many years. I repressed them with everything else, and I was lucky that I didn't remember. But there was someone from my past telling me everything I knew was a lie? Again? Just because you have a mental illness doesn't make you a killer. Tears spilled down from her eyes. I can't live with myself keeping this from you. You deserve to know the truth. She leaned in and whispered in my ear. You didn't kill your mom. Your dad did.